From the Sanibel Rocks Civic Association. The health of our lakes in the Rocks area has been a topic of concern for many of the residents of the West Gulf Drive, Rabbit Road community. Board President Rusty Forrest and board member Dawn Schumann scheduled a meeting with SCCF biologist Mark Thompson in early 2017 to discuss options to enhance the overall health of our lakes and water bodies, and what we as homeowners can do to protect and preserve our backyard ecosystems.
On what problems you're trying to address,
Water color more than anything right now.
Okay.
But there's a reason for that.
Yeah, and before you didn't have that color, right?
No.
We showed the lakes that we had monitored for the study that the city funded on community lakes, and these were some of the sites in your general vicinity.
Mm-hmm.
And of those, what we found was we ranked all the lakes on Sanibel that we sampled about 72 lakes, and there's probably about 85 to 90 lakes on Sanibel. So we got a good percentage of the total number of lakes on Sanibel. What we did is based on nitrogen, phosphorus, and chlorophyll, we ranked the lakes from worst to best. So the worst ones got the lowest ranking. Like number 1 is the worst, number 2 is second worst, and then 72 was the best of the ones that we sampled. So, of the lakes in your area that you're concerned with, the 2 lakes along the bike path had the poorest water quality that you might be most concerned with, and they were 12th and 13th, worse relative to the other lakes on Sanibel.
Mm-hmm.
And their chlorophyll concentrations were pretty high. They were average 47 for one and 25 for the other, which are both high. Those numbers would put them on the, as it would list them as impaired by the state if they were monitoring those lakes. So the state's not monitoring those lakes, but if they were, they would designate those as impaired water bodies due to nutrients, due to enriched nitrogen and phosphorus. Too much nitrogen and phosphorus in those lakes, causing chlorophyll. So, but as far as the remainder of the lakes go, they're probably pretty good, especially the ones that are in the rocks themselves. We sampled 3 locations in the rocks lakes, and they were all relative to the others. They were better water quality.
So there's 2 lakes in East Rocks and 1 lake in West Rocks.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
And
Okay.
all of our other rocks,
And we
lakes are
sampled
bad.
all 3 of those lakes, basically.
and they're all bad.
And no,
Yeah.
actually, these lakes were pretty good.
They were
the
pretty
ones
good
in
in
the rocks.
accordance with.
Yeah.
East rocks were good.
Yeah, they were good as far as nutrients go, but even we have a lake that we dug at the Bailey Homestead site.
Mm-hmm.
Has low nutrient concentrations. It has no fertilizer around it or anything else, and it's been there for probably 3 years now, and we periodically get some algae blooms on that lake. So
Wow.
that is just more or less a natural thing, and groundwater can supply just enough nutrients to cause an algae bloom. I mean, different kinds of there's a lot of different kind of algae, and different ones can bloom at different levels of nitrogen or phosphorus or different conditions and all. So we find that even in some of the best lakes, we can get algae blooms. So that being said, there's things that you can do to prevent the algae, prevent conditions that algae blooms can cause, such as fish kills or low oxygen or smell or whatever. And what we normally recommend is for lakes that end up getting first of all, there's a lot of different kinds of algae. One kind of algae that is fairly common on Sanibel is this blue-green algae mat. It's kind of a floating algae on top of the water surface. And that mat is actually, you know, a mass of filamentous algae, and it can be removed mechanically using rakes, or we've used nets before. We use seine nets to remove it, but the dunes used to have a problem with that on a couple of their lakes, and they used to have a guy come out. They used to have Aquagenics come out, spray the algae with copper, and basically what happens then is you spray the algae with copper. The algae will die, but then it just settles down to the bottom of the lake, and then all that organic material is sitting down in the bottom of the lake, and the nutrients that are associated with it, and eventually it starts degrading again. The nutrients go back in the water column, and 3 or 4 months later you have another algae bloom. You get the exact same thing happen, and you call up Aquagenics. They come back out, do the exact same thing. It just keeps happening and keeps happening and keeps happening. Second of all, they want to cut their lawns right down to the edge of the lake, and they don't want to have any plants at the edge of the lake. So everything just runs off right into the lakes. Whereas if you had some kind of buffer of plants here, you get less water and less nitrogen and phosphorus going into the lake in the first place. And also, if you have plants, you have those plants taking up the nitrogen and phosphorus. So what people have been doing for so long is just killing all the plants along the edge of the lakes, cutting right down to the lake, fertilizing their lawns. They start out with a beautiful lake when they first moved in. After 20 years, they finally hit the point where there's so much nitrogen and phosphorus in there that they're just going to continually have blooms. And that's why, you know, everybody contacts, first thing they do is they start having blooms. They contact the city and say, "We didn't have this problem last year, the year before, ever I can remember." No, you didn't, because it took 20 years for it to finally get to this point, and from this point on, you're going to have this problem forever unless we change the way we do things. And what we need to change is not use fertilizer if we can get it. If you can not use fertilizer, reduce the amount you use. You know, you know, we've had this happening on the dunes. What we did was we went out and mechanically removed it with rakes, and that's what the dunes actually has. Their golf course people, they started, instead of throwing copper on there, they came out and mechanically removed it with rakes, a little at a time. Took them about 3 months total to get all the.
Where did they dispose it at?
What they did is they pulled it up on shore, they let it dry out, and then they just put it in the back of their vehicles, and they trucked it on over to their lawn care site, and they let it degrade some, dry out more, and they used it for compost.
Could we do that same kind of thing?
Yes, if you end up having this kind of thing happen, I mean, the biggest thing is it was the perfect situation at the dunes. They were willing to listen, and they had the manpower, which were the golf course maintenance guys, to do the work. So they just worked that into their schedule, did a little bit at a time, you know, and eventually got all the algae removed. And that was 4 years ago when they had a big algae bloom like this. And for 4 years now, that lake has been cleared. But they've done some other things.
There's one more lake there, if you go back to our map, that you didn't get. Just a little one. I think it's man-made. It's at the end. It's right there.
This one?
Yeah.
We actually did sample that one.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
okay.
we did sample that one. And it is this one right here. Okay. So it's, you know, of the, you know, it's somewhere.
It's okay.
A little bit higher. But you know, the chlorophyll, the average we got was 20. Basically, the state will say that anything that averages over 20 might be impaired, you know, depending on what the levels of TN and TP are.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like borderline as far as water quality goes.
It's the worst of the four.
It's the worst of. It's the next worst from
the
these
rocks.
two that.
Right.
Yeah, these two near the bike path.
But
But
are you doing anything to the bike path ponds at this at lakes at this particular
yes. What we got going on right now is I'm gonna. The city, they've contracted with FGCU to look at 6 pretty bad or not so good lakes on Sanibel and do a complete chemical analysis of the lakes, including the sediments, the water column, map the bottom of the lakes, map the vegetations in the lakes, and get a complete understanding of each of those 6 lakes. And from those 6 lakes, we hope to be able to extrapolate and get a cross section of what's going on in lakes on Sanibel, and we'll have a better idea. First of all, what's causing problems. Is it sediment? Is it lack of vegetation? What's the average depths of lakes and things like that. So we're going to get all this information back from those extensive studies of those 6 lakes, and one of the lakes happens to be this lake here along between the bike path and Rabbit Road. So that'll be one of the lakes that we get a lot of information on, and we'll get sediment depth to know how much muck there is in the bottom.
Rabbit Road used to be very, very low. And
Okay.
it used to flood all the time.
So
there's a tremendous amount of fill and pavement that made Rabbit Road. I happen to know this from talking to Bob Sabatino, some of the old timers.
Yeah.
That would be the first road that would flood on Sanibel with heavy rains. And Island Water Association is very close to them.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they've got it. And it used to be on the other side. The other clearing is where Island Water Association was.
Oh, okay.
On the other side of Rabbit
here?
Road. No.
Somewhere.
On the other side over there,
Okay.
where everybody parks now for the trolley.
Okay.
That was where Island Water was.
Huh.
So I'm wondering if that had to do, because those lakes should be clear. It's right next to the river. Although Lake Murex is there, where does Lake Murex lakes compare to?
They're about the same.
They're in there.
Yeah, they're pretty good.
Which are the worst lakes on the island? The 5 worst lakes in order.
Well, down where the bayous, some of those lakes down by Sanibel bayous, they're. I'll show you.
Are they tidally influenced?
No,
or?
they're not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're tidally influenced just because the groundwater there is tidally influenced because it's close enough.
Because they're close enough.
It's close enough to Clam Bayou, which is now tidally influenced.
Yeah, isn't that beautiful though?
But basically these lakes here were all dug for fill for the which most of the lakes on Sanibel, that's why they're there, is because they were dug for fill for the developments, and then they act as stormwater ponds after they're done. So some of these lakes right through here had really high concentrations of chlorophyll, nitrogen, and phosphorus, and the bayou's wastewater treatment plant.
The wastewater treatment plant was there.
And we're totally correlate. It's because if you look at an old aerial, you see that the wastewater ponds that used to be there.
Oh yeah.
And we're right here. This was all treated wastewater holding ponds, but that treated wastewater still had tons of because a secondary treatment plant, which is what it does, doesn't really take out much nitrogen and phosphorus.
What about the ponds down on Lake or Donak Street, where the place is now, where the treatment plant is now?
Okay.
How do those lakes? How are they responding? Because there's a
in
golf course right there.
Right. And these are high. They're some of the highest ponds, but see the different color this one is compared to the rest of them?
Okay.
This one right here is actually a holding pond for wastewater.
The bad stuff.
Yeah, well...
Wastewater.
It's treated wastewater. It's not really the bad stuff. It's actually good water. It's actually great stuff if you want to irrigate your lawn and that's what they're doing with it. They pump out of this lake to irrigate the golf course because it's loaded with nitrogen and phosphorus. So they're irrigating and fertilizing their golf course at the same time by using treated wastewater from the wastewater treatment plant, which we're all connected to now. A lot of them can't get of the 3 golf courses can't get enough water to irrigate their golf courses from the wastewater treatment plant. But sometimes you're right, they can't use as much as the wastewater treatment plant is producing, and what the wastewater treatment plant does is they inject the wastewater into the well that Island Water has.
2,900 feet.
Yeah, but there are plenty of native plants that take up nutrients that can be planted, and
like what?
We can get that list from SCCF
you can get
what
from,
to plant.
Yeah, you can get it from Jenny at the Native Plant Nursery, or you can go to IFAS, which is IFAS, which is the University of Florida's Extension Service, and they have so much information on native plants and what to plant,
Are
around your property or around your lakes,
are cattails as good as plants that you might plant on your own? Are
Yes.
cattails a good thing?
Well, cattails are a good thing as far as water quality goes. They remove nutrients from the water big time, and what you can do with cattails, if you have the labor to, you can cut them down every year, take them out of there, haul them off, just like that algae I was telling you about. You rake it off. Cattails, you can cut down the cattails or pull them out, whatever you want to do, every year, and you're taking nutrients that they took out of the soil, out of the water. You're taking those nutrients out of the system with them, and you can haul them off and have them, landfilled or whatever you want to with them. Just
Right.
get them away. Then they'll regrow, and they'll use up more nutrients regrowing and everything. So if you keep doing that, what you're doing every year is taking nitrogen and phosphorus out of the system, and that's what you want to be doing. So that's actually one of the great best management practices for lowering nutrient concentrations. I like Bacopa,
Spell it, please.
Bacopa, Bacopa, but it's real easy to grow, and it grows along the edges of lakes.
Do you think that if a group of us from the Rocks got together, that Jenny would show us a list of do a little
yeah.
tour for us down there of plants that would be good for our lakes?
Yeah, and Jenny or one of the girls would,
Yeah,
for
right.
sure. Yeah, I think they do that pretty frequently.
And that would
yeah.
be a good practice for us.
Yeah.
It all started with, should we use aerators in these lakes?
Yeah.
Answer that question or address that if there's
Well, there's that's all specific to the people in the homeowners association. Aerators will more than likely improve water quality, because what they're going to be doing is they're going to be mixing things up. They're going to provide more oxygen. When you have more oxygen, like at the bottom of your lake, things will degrade faster. The stuff that goes in your lake, leaves, clippings, anything that's in the bottom of your lake that's causing bacteria to use oxygen down there. Anyway, if you add air to it, it's going to degrade faster. Your sediment content of the amount of sediment you have in the bottom of the lake is going to be reduced. And you won't have fish kills, because you're going to have oxygen being pumped into your lake all the time. So you won't have fish kills.
Are there
You're gonna have
permits
less oxygen.
required? Where does the electricity come from? Is it solar powered? Is
Well,
it done at
and
night?
that's-
All those kinds of questions then
so-
were addressed.
Right, there are permits required by the city, and I think that's probably the only place that you have to get a permit. And
Wow.
basically, it's an accessory development permit, which is real easy to do. Basically, just draw them a picture of what you want to do, show them where you want to do it at. They sign off on it, and they charge you $200 or whatever for the
Right.
permit. But there are
Can you guys install it for us? Have you ever
no,
done
we don't
one?
see we don't really do anything like that. I mean,
Is there a company that does?
Oh, there's lots of them.
Okay.
Or somebody'd have to take a look at your lake, determine, what the stuff that's blooming in your lake is, and if it's blue-green algae, what blue-green algae needs, they need really calm conditions. And what Solar Bee does is, one of the things they do is they put in big pumps at the bottom of your lake that creates this circulation in your lake, so your lake is kind of like it becomes kind of like a circulating, flowing river, except your lake is just circulating like this. So your lake starts turning over all the time. So it's aerating your lake, it's keeping the water moving, and blue-green algae can't survive in water that's flowing.
Is it good for the fish? We have
Yeah,
largemouth bass there.
Yeah.
Do we really?
It's great.
Yes.
It'll be great.
It's the
for,
best lake for largemouth
Yeah.
bass on the island.
No, it'd be great
Yours
for
or
them.
ours?
Ours. It's the same lake.
Is it?
Yeah.
It actually it would be something, aeration in general
Right.
is better for the native fish than
Like
the
the
invasive
Cuban.
fish. Because the Mayan cichlids
Right.
and
The
the
Mayan.
tilapia, they're able to gulp air, so they can live in real low oxygen conditions, whereas you're going to have sunfish and bass dying off. They're going to survive. And so that's why most of our lakes around here are being taken over by these
those.
guys, because the water quality is getting worse, lower oxygen conditions. Those guys are dying off, and these guys are really good at reproducing and surviving in any condition and eating anything. They don't need to be solar powered either. They could be, I mean, like over at the dunes, they have aeration systems, and they're all just hooked into LCEC, you know, and they've got these little green boxes that have compressors in them, which are air pumps, and they've got those compressors on timers, and they go on. I'm not sure what time they got them set at, but you know, it's probably something like 10 o'clock at night, and then they turn off at 9.
Our Stewart
something
lift
in the morning.
station, which is right at the beginning of West Rocks, it has electricity going to it.
Really?
And I'm wondering whether there can be an arrangement made where we could tap into that electricity and run it through somebody's back underground
Yeah.
onto the lake.
But what the city and their nutrient management program wants to do, provide you those services, and only those services, and
Is that
you
working
know,
with James Evans or
Yeah, James and Dana.
and Dana?
Yeah, Dana Detmar.
Okay.
She's kind of like the lakes person now. I
Oh,
mean, you know,
okay.
James he's the head.
Yeah,
But
he's got a
Dana's
lot
like
going.
taking over the lake stuff.
She's the boots
So-
on the ground.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And she's going out and sampling. I mean, she's
What's her name, Dana? What?
Detmar. Dettmar.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and she's at the natural resources office over there
Mm-hmm.
at the city. So she's actually the one that you guys, you know, probably want to be meeting with.
If we move
Yeah.
forward with this,
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
the girl.
because right, and
Okay.
she's the one that's, you know, spearheading the FGCU study,
Whoa.
and you know, she's the one that gets all of our information that we do on sampling, monitoring the lakes and stuff, and then puts that into actions that the city will do.
We're
60.
West Rocks.
Okay, West Rocks.
Yeah.
Then you're number 69 out of 72 lakes, so you're the best.
what are
so
the
this-
three other ones there? The
Periwinkle Pines.
Pines.
Periwinkle Place, the pond behind Periwinkle Place. is
Shopping
real-
center? Seriously?
Yeah,
that
has
one?
great water quality and lots of fish too. Yeah, and
Really?
then there's a pond at the end of Beach Road. There's some condos down there at the north end of Beach Road.
So we are
That's really
what
good water
number
quality.
then? I have us at 12
You're-
and 13 poorest.
Well, 12 and 13 are the lakes along the bike path.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Oh.
so since you were saying that you guys kind of,
They took a hit somehow, and I don't know how. I don't
Well,
know why.
I mean, there's a lot of different things that it could be. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it could be groundwater in that area for whatever reason
Right.
is higher in nutrient concentration, which we have some data from out there. But there is also some reclaimed water used out there for irrigation in that area that, you know, may affect
You
it.
know, before the deep injection well,
Mhm.
did you know that the pipe ran across there down Rabbit Road and came out at Westwind?
I think it still does. Do they still have a discharge out in that area?
No,
Okay.
no, they plugged it. It can be unplugged. If the
Okay.
if the injection well ever fails.
But they still need because the way they do reverse osmosis, they have a concentrated solution. Maybe they inject that concentrated solution down the well now. All the golf courses on Sanibel use water from the Donex wastewater treatment plant. So most of the water from the Donex wastewater treatment plant goes to those golf courses. That's where most of our when we
Yeah.
flush, most of our stuff is going out in the golf course. But it's treated and it's perfectly good water, you know. But it's just it's still high in nutrients. And the city right now, they're designing an addition to the wastewater treatment plant to take out more phosphorus and nitrogen to where they get the concentrations really low, so that irrigation water won't have high concentrations
As much
in
as
it.
it does.
But the thing
Gotcha.
is, if it's used properly right now,
Yeah.
if it doesn't run off,
Right.
if it goes on land that needs it, that plants are going to take it up, you're going to have the nitrogen and phosphorus removed by the plants before
Right.
it gets to the groundwater or before it runs off. But it's a
Away.
bloom of phytoplankton that's causing
Yeah.
that coloration. And, you know, aeration would probably end up helping with that. But what the cities of Naples did, that they had success with, and with what one of the things that the city of Sanibel is now recommending, and that we've had some success with, is the way they got from this to this rake it out or anything else. See, I don't know if you can tell in this picture, but there's a floating island out there.
Yeah.
What they did is they installed aeration in these lakes along with floating islands.
I like
Up
the
to-
idea of removing cattails and letting them grow another
Yeah,
5
and-
years.
and-
Removing them then.
Yeah.
Or removing all the cattails, letting them grow
Yep.
again, because you're hauling all that stuff off.
And using something like Bacopa all along the shorelines, because what happened with Bacopa is it
Yeah.
will grow along the shoreline, but it'll grow out over the water too, and the roots will just hang down the water. They become your floating island, and all you've done is invested in planting Bacopa. And once it gets established, it just starts spreading, and it's really a beautiful. They have beautiful flowers. They're just creeping. They're a creeping plant. They'll creep along. They only stay along the edge of the. I think would be a good thing for you. So you can even see it.
Huh.
See from this is the shoreline right here,
Yeah. The
and
darker
from here to
green.
here, that's most of it's Bacopa. Some of it's some other aquatic plants which are good, like rupia, but most of this is Bacopa that just grows out over that part of the lake. And at any time you want to, you can, once you get this much of it, you could harvest some of that,
Cuttings.
take it away, and let it grow again. But it's always going to be growing. So when it gets out too far or whatever, or gets to places you don't want it, you just go out there and rake it out. Or have somebody rake it out, and you're removing. And as long as they take it away, just like they take your yard clippings away, as long as they take it away, then you're taking nutrients out of the system, and that's what you want to be doing. But at a low water level like this is a good time if you're going to harvest some to actually harvest some, get it out of there. It's kind of dried up anyway, and it'll regrow. So.
It's too early to tell whether the water coming down the Caloosahatchee is having a leach impact on our lakes.
No, I would
probably
say
not a
no,
non-issue.
because especially from Rabbit Road Rabbit Road this way, pretty much we have enough fresh water on the island that it's always flowing off the island, so that
it's pushing
the
away.
pressure is flowing off. We have groundwater flowing off the island. In the summertime,
Yeah.
like down there by the sundial, I
Yeah.
mean, basically all from the sundial all the way down to
Where the river used to empty
yeah.
into the Gulf.
Basically, that's it.
The colony.
where the Sanibel Slough used to flow over sometimes.
I remember
and there
that.
is right now an underwater, groundwater river that flows that way and empties out
How
all
interesting.
along here.
Yeah.
It just it's flowing like that, and it's always emptying out into the Gulf. And at low tides, and especially after rains and stuff like that,
Yeah.
you can see it.
In the summer when the island gets full of water,
Yeah.
it comes out.
Yeah. When I was looking at your neighborhood
I had-
before,
yeah.
there's, you couldn't really ask. There's always going to be a few, but you couldn't ask for better.
As a community.
As a community, better
Yeah.
landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
So really,
Yeah.
as far as landscaping in the community as a whole, it's probably not going to be. You could improve it. Like these guys right here. They got a lot of open yard there, but they probably like it.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get them to plant more trees there, but if you could,
They're
that'd be a
looking
good thing.
across.
But they have
It's
stuff
so
on the
beautiful.
bank, right?
Yeah.
So
But they do have stuff on the bank. They
Right.
got some kind of buffer there, which is a good thing. So the main thing to do is get some kind of vegetative buffer. It doesn't have to be trees or anything. It can be different kinds of plants that Jenny can tell you about. This one here just flows this way to the Sanibel Slough or river, and this lake here flows right here down this.
go
ditch,
west
so
a little
that's-
bit further
Okay.
in our subdivision. Right there.
Oh, is
At
this-
the end, right there where you are, that's the one that John's upset about.
Okay, right. And this is actually a discharge structure. I've been out here before,
Mm-hmm.
and if this lake gets too high, what it does is it flows this way. And then I'm not really sure I guess it's probably the route it would take is this way to the river, I think.
Yeah.
But
one
maybe
of
they
them.
put in those extra, so maybe they made it instead of them, okay, let's say you get a high level condition in these lakes.
Yeah.
Instead of having all the water just flow directly into the Sanibel River and raising the Sanibel River really quickly, what they probably wanted to do, I think this is all
disperse it?
SCCF.
Fish and Wildlife or
Yeah,
SCCF.
they just wanted to
yeah.
disperse it within these, wetlands.
Yeah.
and instead of like just having it all flow
Doesn't
out,
that make
yeah,
sense?
fill this up. So that's probably what those ditches might be for, is to help disperse this more, so that maybe those ditches are designed to overflow into here. I don't know, but most of the properties look great, except for then you get a few like here that could probably do a better job of putting a buffer between themselves, between their yards, you know, and the waters. Like right here, you could probably have a better buffer there. But also it depends on what you're putting on your yard. If you're not putting any fertilizer on there, you know, it's the impact is not that great. So the two things you want to try to do is reduce the amount of water that's running off your yard.
Yeah.
And the other thing is reduce the amount of nutrients that it had, nitrogen, phosphorus, that water has in it. So the big thing you can do to reduce the amount of water that's running off your yard is to have more vegetation and more canopy. The more canopy you have, canopy is the best thing because that means you got trees. It intercepts water before it hits the ground. It starts evaporating from there, and then when it hits the ground, you know, trees have these incredible root systems. You think that water is just going to run off, but what happens is those roots are under there sucking, and they act like a big sponge. And when it rains, they're like sucking water into the plant, so they're pumping it up into the plant, and they're acting as storage, you know, vessels for the water. So instead of the water running off and going into your lake, it's going into all the plants. Come up with so many best management practices. One of them is getting rid of those non-native fish, the tilapia and Mayan cichlids, because those guys, they eat that zooplankton that normally eats algae, and that's what they go for first. But they can eat anything, but they go for that first. So they'll rid your lake of that. You won't have any of these algae eaters in there. And then they go and they start stirring up the bottom. They look for food in the sediment and stuff. So they're stirring up the sediment, and the sediment has a lot of phosphorus in it. That puts more phosphorus into the water column because they're stirring up the sediment.
So tilapia is not good.
So the
Tilapia
cichlids, how can
and so
we
we were trying to
get those guys?
We were trying to have cast net rodeos to get as many cichlids as we could, like out of the dunes lakes. Just take a second.
It's down below and to the right.
They're really pretty looking fish. See, they get
Those
this.
are cichlids?
Yep, these are Mayan cichlids. See, they get that spot right there.
But they're
and
good or they're bad?
They're bad.
Yeah.
They're bad for water quality. And they're exotic. They're non-native exotics. Those guys came from South America. The blue tilapia, which we had, came from Africa. So, and the way they got here, you know, they didn't take a bus or anything, is that people in aquaculture, they're great aquaculture fish because they can survive in low dissolved oxygen water. You know, they're easy. They'll eat everything, anything. You know, nothing can kill them. They reproduce really quickly, so they're perfect aquaculture fish. So people brought them over here to the U.S. for aquaculture, and they've just spread from, you know, so some people just put them in their lakes because they wanted
Pretty fish.
They wanted fish in their lakes that they could always eat.
Always survive, always eat.
Yeah.
Like
I mean, it only takes one person to put a few of them in there, and then
Yeah.
you've got them forever. So they can breathe air, so they don't need any oxygen in the water. They can just go up there, and as long as they can keep their gills wet, they can go to the surface.
Interesting.
And that's why they outcompete our native fish, because they can survive in conditions that our native fish can't survive in. Water, your lakes are fresh water. I mean, basically, there's no problem with the salt in your lake. You know, it's because the salinity is real low. It's 0.5. It's not anywhere near 3. So basically, it's just like
the
fresh
ospreys are coming and taking baths every afternoon
Okay,
and
so-
washing off.
Yeah. Whenever you have a bloom, especially stuff that's floating on top, harvest it mechanically, get it out of there, take it away.
How deep are our lakes?
They're probably about 10 feet in the middle. I mean, it seems like 10
So
to 12
around
feet. It's not, you know, this might be somewhere between 2 to 6 feet. You have a little ledge that might be only maybe, you know, 2 or 3 feet deep. You have this little ledge, but then it just drops off to 10 to 12 feet. Yeah, and pretty much the whole is more, they call it box cut. So it's more, you know, the idea is it's more like a box. It just drops off. You got 10 feet deep lake everywhere almost, and you don't really have much on the sides. But to grow emergent plants, the plants that are living in the water, you need this shelf.
The ledge.
And so wherever you have a ledge, you know, it'd be good to get some kind of plants growing on that. And if you're not using an herbicide, more probably there's something growing there. So one thing that happens whenever it rains is the conditions in the lake change right after rain. And if conditions don't change for a long time, one kind of algae can take over and cause a bloom, and it can just multiply. And then it rains, and just because water started moving around, the nutrient concentrations, the ratio of the nutrient concentrations changed or something a little bit, then they can no longer dominate. You know, something else starts competing with them, and then the water clears up because you got competition going in there, and they're fighting each other.
Yeah.
And until one algae can become dominant again, you know, your water's going to be clear. But then as soon as conditions get to where it's good for one, that can just bloom. But you know, that's something that aeration would eliminate, is you wouldn't have any fish kills because it puts oxygen into the water. But
Okay. East
but you
rocks
don't-
might be interesting.
yeah, so you know, there's different things you can do for different lakes with different. But like Rusty said, as soon as it starts raining, things are going to change. One way or another, they're going to change. Yeah.
Okay, right.
I mean, if
got
the
you.
rain washes a lot of nutrients in there, you might get a different kind of bloom. But if you know your landscape looks pretty great, and not everybody.
If it does what it's done in the past, it's going to
Yeah.
get better.
Yeah, it'll probably get better rather
Yeah.
than get worse. But a lot of places it gets worse just because all these new loads of nutrients are coming in with the rain. So,
Yeah.
but yours will probably get better.